So just a little bit about me, just so that you understand where I come from. I'm what I call the champion of the unnoticed entrepreneur. So people work with me to get noticed for what they do, and I work with clients to help them clarify their messages and put in place affordable marketing strategies. I have three books. This is the latest one, just come out, published by Wiley, actually, all on the subject of getting noticed. And I work as a business coach. I also host a podcast that's in the top 2.5% of podcasts worldwide called The Unnoticed Entrepreneur. And I have an academy, which is where I raised to Tony about this idea of really helping people within stepping stones, because I really work through the different platforms that I have, the book, the podcast, and the coaching, to get people noticed. So what I've done is put together a little bit of a deck for today to talk about how you as Neds can get noticed. And I think, Tony, we've got about 20 minutes. Is that right, for the presentation, and then 10 minutes or so for the Q&A? Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
Okay. So this is a blog post that I put on my website so that it's easy to find. And in a way, that'll be part of the strategy that I'm going to be suggesting to you. Okay. So how to get noticed and personal brand essentials, right? I'm going to just do this. Can you still see my screen? You can? Okay, great. Hey, Nigel, nice to see you. Basically, how many of you remember those days when we graduated from university and you went on the job round? Do you guys remember that? And there would be, like, in the in this big hall, there'd be a few tables. Marks and Spencer's, I remember, was a particularly good one because you got good food and you got a free suit. A friend of mine worked there, but we were all sort of lined up with our CVs and our prospective A-level grades, looking for opportunities outside of university. And in a way, it sounds as though the Ned market is a little bit similar. And it seems to me, having taken the course and listened to the experts, that there is a competition for Ned roles. Would that be a fair summary, right? So I think this is why we need to stand out. This is what I'm here to help you to do. So there's bad news and good news. Apparently, there are some 50,000 active Neds in the UK. And there was a recent survey that came out, which I actually shared in the Stepping Stones group last week, that shows that 25% of companies surveyed by Norman Broadbent, you can see here, acknowledge the need for more Neds. And this is the opportunity for all of us on the course and on the call, that 96% of these companies that were surveyed stated that they struggled to attract the right talent. And I think that part of what we can do, and what I'm going to show you how to do, is to solve their problem as well. This is the process that companies go through when they are looking for a Ned. There's an initial assessment and shortlisting. There's a background and reputation research. There's competency and skills assessment. There's a cultural fit evaluation, then due diligence and final decision. So this is my understanding. This comes from the Norman Broadbent report on the different stages that companies and NGOs go through when they're looking for a non-exec director. How many of you have got a CV that looks a little bit like this? Does that look familiar to anybody? And for most of us who have been around for a while, we've got a lot of things on our pages, right? And we've been told to write everything that you've ever done, and however you added value, put it there. And that's what the researchers and the Ned recruiters in-house and otherwise were looking for. I'm going to suggest that this is fundamentally the wrong approach. Okay. I'm going to suggest to you that, sorry, Tony, for if I'm insulting anybody, but putting more and more information down in this day and age at our stages in life and the value we can add, I think, is fundamentally the wrong approach. I'm going to show you what I think is an alternative, actually what I know is an alternative. We're going to take Tony's actually as a bit of an example. Now, I mentioned, first of all, we send CVs or we upload them to these various platforms, about 8 different platforms that are helping to match NEDs to prospective companies. The first place that they're all going to go is to Google to look for you, right? That's the first place that anyone goes to look for pretty much anything these days. So that's the first place they're going to go when they get your CV. Okay. The next place, because remember, Google is really just kind of like the starting of the navigation. It's going to take whoever's looking, the researcher or the HR director or whoever it is, it's going to take them to one of what currently I would imagine is a social media platform. How many of you have got LinkedIn profiles? Yep. And then, Nigel, you don't have a LinkedIn profile? Okay. How many of you got, for example, Facebook? Not so many. Let's just go on. And maybe an X Twitter account, an X. Yeah, so you've got a few. This is where people are going to start to look at. We've got some challenges if you're relying on these platforms. First of all, if you're on LinkedIn and you're looking for Tony Stubbs and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do some research. On social media, we are a commodity. Remember, we are the product on social media. So Tony's done his best. He's filled out 25 pages of everything he's ever done since he was 16 that qualify him to be a NED. And I'm going, oh, Tony Stubbs is interesting, but look, oh, I could talk to Maria as well. I could talk to Jeremy. Oh, Michael's got an interesting CV. Tony is not in control of this process. Okay, this is where the problem originates, right? We're not in control. So in social media, and this is the same for LinkedIn, for Facebook, for Insta, it's in the platform's interest, just like on Amazon, to be honest, to send you or to send the researcher, you might also like this, right? Their job is to keep you there. It's not to get Tony that NED role. The next problem you've got, how many people here have been hacked at some stage in the last year or so? Well, statistically, if we had a few more of us, 1 or 2 of us would have been hacked. You may not even have known you've been hacked, actually. So 22% of users have said that their accounts have been hacked at least once in the last year. In my PR life, I used to work for a company called F5, which is a very large online security company. If you haven't been hacked now, statistically, you might be hacked at some stage. And what you're seeing now, for example, on LinkedIn is where people are taking over other people's LinkedIn accounts, for example. Okay, so we have to be very careful of that. The other key point is when you are on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, you're on rented or in rented space. You do not own that space. You'll have heard people at the moment complaining about X and how their posts are being tamped down, are being squashed. It happens where people are losing their accounts through, I have someone I've known on LinkedIn who just had 30,000 people removed and his account taken down. He still doesn't know why, and there's nothing you can do about it. So if you're building your business, it's just like if you owned a property and if you were renting a restaurant building and you had your restaurant in it, the landlord said, I don't want to have a restaurant anymore. You don't have a business. Okay. So this is a key point I'd like you to take away is if you are building your brand on borrowed land, you could be evicted. So I come back to my original here, right? So you are at the moment, or we are, in danger of competing with everybody else who's got a briefcase or now an iPad with their life story on it. This is what I'd like for you to think about, and this is very possible. It's where you become the person that the companies come to. So we want people to come to you, not for you to go to them. That shifts the fundamental balance of power. Okay. These are some of the dimensions that I'd like to suggest that you put into your personal brand. This is on my website at jimajames.com, and Bryony will also share this with you. So that's why I put it on my website as a blog, so you can find this as well. The personal brand is going to have a few items. I'm going to take you through each of them. Okay. That, in my view, create your most essential content. So just as an aside, I spent 25 years running a PR firm, right? I started my first PR firm in Singapore in 1995. So I've done 25 years of corporate brand building, but I've also built lots of personal brands and entrepreneurs brands, including my own. So we've got some structural things like the website. We've got some content elements like the photographs and the stories, the podcast, the articles, and the videos. I'm going to show you what I mean. The first thing I'd like you to consider, if you haven't done this already, and Ursula's on the call and she has, and I'm going to share with you in a minute what she's done, which is brilliant. If you do, how many of you own your own domain name? Here, how many of you own your own? Okay, one. Simon owns his. Heather, you don't own yours. Nicola, sorry, you don't own yours. Ursula, I know you own yours. Okay. Tony, do you own your own domain name? No. Okay. He's on. Okay. I think you can see where I'm going with this, right? If you're renting space and you don't own your own domain name, someone else will. Just as an aside, I own the domain names for my children already. Okay. And it's extremely cheap and easy to do. On this call, I don't have the time to show you how, but I'm going to give you the points you need to think about. Now, on the left is a very useful and handsome looking Tony. But if you look everywhere, it's the same picture of Tony. It looks a little bit like he's got jaundice. Now, what we can do, of course, is we can use tools, AI tools, which can save you money, time, and take back the years a little bit. Okay. In the course, I show you how to do this. But the great thing about AI is it doesn't have to change who you are. It just is enhancing who you are. But more importantly, what it's doing is it's creating those backgrounds for you, like you're in the garden, you're in the office, you're wearing different clothes. If you were to do this with normal photography, £500-600 a day, and you'd be lucky to get 1 or 2 shoots. So the first thing to think about with your personal brand is to look great. It doesn't mean not to look yourself, by the way. It just means to put the best possible face on yourself that you can. Now, the second thing that I'd like you to think about is to tell your story. This is work that Tony and I have been doing together. Okay. So remember, Tony has got this long, extremely detailed 10-point bio, and it's fabulous, right? But if I've got thousands of CVs, do I really want to look through them all? So Tony, do you want to jump in and just tell that top line of your story? I'm putting him on the spot here a bit.
You are. But yeah, this is where we got to, working together. Jim sort of helpfully reminded me of one of literally the high spots of my life and career, which was when I stepped out of corporate life, and it was my first proper sort of independent management consultant gig. And I ended up, as you see there, working for a company that provided back office systems for banks. And my first port of call was New York City. And I was staying in a 5-star hotel and indulging my great passion swimming in their rooftop pool and looking down on Central Park and thinking, this is the life. So I'd taken that first step towards escaping corporate life and becoming my own boss.
And you can see here now what we're doing is we're creating a narrative which is a much more human one, right, about Tony. And you're much more likely then to want to know more about him. And we then go on to have really 3 paragraphs that summarize where he comes from, where he's been, and what he's going to be doing in the future, and why that's going to make an impact on the people that work with him. Okay. So we trade this long essay for a story. Okay. The next thing we wanted to look at is packaging yourself. So we want Tony to be seen as someone who knows how to add value and not be a commodity. So we've used a nice template to create a way for Tony to look and feel like premium positioning. Okay. Would anyone say this looks a little bit better than the long resume? And also, you get a picture of Tony, right? And if you think you've got thousands of or hundreds of resumes to look at, which one's going to stand out, right? So packaging yourself, especially as now we live in an attention deficit society, right? So now we've got everything about Tony, including a picture, on one page. Now, Ursula kindly let me borrow her website. So she owns her own domain name. And what she's got is a lovely picture. And then she also has an explanation about how she can help. So she says, that's right. Do you want me to ask you to jump in and say that? Or I don't, again,
No,
I haven't.
you go ahead. I wish you weren't pinned because couldn't even see Tony speaking last time.
Oh, yeah.
You seem to be pinned at the top, but no, you go ahead. You'll do.
Okay. So, but Ursula says, with board level expertise across digital retail, media and nonprofits, I bring seasoned governance and strategic insight to boards as non-executive director. Okay. It's elegant. It's simple. So I'm seeing a photograph and seeing what she does. I'm like, great. Okay. I'd like to talk to her. Again, moving away from this long list of things she's done to being very strategic and guided. This is another client called Dan Morrison. Actually, we also went to university together at Chapel Hill 30 years ago, but by the by, we've stayed in touch. Dan now has come out of corporate. So he got in touch with me a little while ago to help him. And it's a bit harder for you to read, but basically here, what he's done is a personal website with some expensive photography. And here on his homepage, above the fold, as we call it, in the first third of the screen, he's talking about how he helps bring clarity to an organization as a board advisor and investor. Okay. Final one is creating desire to work with someone. So this is Dr. Shirley James. So here she says, I'm a globally sought after TEDx and well-being keynote speaker. I'm an elected well-liked advisor and faculty member, and I work with successful. So here, Shelley has a personal brand. She went to Bristol for a photographer. She also then has her books. She has her courses, and she has articles, and she has her blog and recent appearances. Okay. Now, what she's also got, and what I'd like you to think about, is explaining your thinking. Can you see how we're moving from here are all the jobs I've done to this is who I am and this is how I can add value and this is how I'm positioned as a premium member of your team. So in this case, Shelley's got these blogs. In the course, I show and also help some of my clients to know how to use ChatGPT and a few other tools to create the blogs without having to sit there and write them all. And I also help them to create the images too. So, but you start to explain your thinking, because actually what people are interested in is what do you think about things rather than necessarily what you've done before. Okay. Because unless they have exactly the same problem, what you've done before isn't really relevant, right? It's your approach that's going to be relevant. This chap here, Sean Lamb, he got a $2 million job by being on a podcast. How do I know that? Because he went on Brandon White's podcast, and Brandon White came on my show the other week, and I went on Brandon's show, and we were just chatting about how we can use podcasts to help people to build their own personality and to get ahead. And what he told me then was, oh, I got this great story about Sean Lamb. Sean was going for a job in a company. So Brandon interviewed him, and it's a great 1.5 hour interview about being a CFO. And he asked Brandon all these questions. When Brandon went for the job interview, they said, oh, it's okay. We've already heard the podcast. We know what you think about discounted cash flow today. Let's talk about our company. $2 million is the best ever. I mean, they're buddies. They go cycling together, and Brandon had him on his show. But the point is, there are podcasts out there for each of you where you can display your expertise, okay, where you can share what you know about your subject matter. And this is taking you away from being one of the people that is submitting a long document into being a personality, into being someone that they engage with. And actually the amount of trust that there is in podcast hosts means that listeners actually trust podcast hosts more now than they do traditional media journalists, just so you know. Next step, you can get onto the TEDx stage. Bit of disclosure, Shelley's actually my sister. She started working with me when I came back from China. We went from her being an electrician on a minimum wage per day to now she gets paid a small fortune to speak on stages around the world to talk about lighting. So I've taken her on this whole journey, and she did a TEDx, which actually then became a TED Talk. If you have a subject matter expertise, there is absolutely no reason why you can't prepare to take that to TEDx first. Shelley's was so successful, it went onto the main TED stage, had 300,000 views in 2 months. So can you see how you would change your positioning then? So in summary, I'd like to suggest to you, and these are all obviously things that I've done with myself, with clients, and with my own family. Own your own domain. Get your elevator pitch to be a story that people can resonate with. Okay. And ultimately to become sought after. So you're not in queue for the jobs. There is a queue of people waiting for you to take their jobs. Okay. So how I can help, I have this, since talking to Tony, started the personal brand blueprint, because I actually have a podcast guest blueprint course. But I think in light of what Tony and I were talking about, I've created the beginnings now of how you can do all the things I've been sharing with you. Pretty much no cost, actually. There are free tools for all of these things that I've shown you. It's really more an approach than anything else. And so this will be shared anyway by Bryony afterwards. But the point here is there is a competition for NED roles. And of course, every year, a bit like the next class of graduates coming out of university, right? There's another lot coming out, right? We need to stand out, and developing and building a personal brand and a personal personality is how I think you can do that. So that takes us to past. That's my 20 minutes. And I hope that has given some food for thought.